Okay, good evening everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to day, God knows they're all measured into one, day 8 of Vlogmas! I'm super excited today because I finally managed to persuade my family that it's time to put up the Christmas tree. So let's go put up the Christmas tree and then hopefully after that I can come back and get on with some work. Done.
Yeah, that'll do.
Okay, so Christmas tree is now up. Got the lights on it. What I've decided to do is I'm probably going to start putting like the baubles and everything else on it gradually throughout next week. I'm not one of these people that can put up a Christmas tree like really quickly. I tend to gradually put them up and like got other decorations to put up as well throughout next week. And also I want to make quite a few little decorations and baubles and stuff to put on the Christmas tree as well. So it's going to be something that gradually develops. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted because I'm trying to get to the end of this knitting row that I'm working on. I just realised I haven't really explained what it is that I'm actually knitting. Obviously it is a blanket, but it is an absolutely ginormous blanket. I basically call it my scarf for a giraffe. Can't quite get it to do justice on this camera, but yeah, it's very long and very wide. It's actually 320 stitches wide, and I don't actually know how many rows long because I stopped keeping track of that a while ago. So basically this is what I call one of my little doodle knit blankets, and basically I use my doodle knit blankets as a big excuse just to like practice different stitches and different patterns and try and come up with different like designs and stuff. So for example, on this little blanket that I'm knitting here, I designed these little heart-shaped patterns on them, which sort of worked alright. I would have preferred it if like it didn't change colour towards the end, but that's just because I basically ran out of the correct colour wool and I couldn't be bothered to wait to get any more. I also use these as like an excuse to use up old bits of yarn and stuff. So yeah, the colours on this particular blanket are like meant to be particularly inspired by, originally they were inspired by a robin, but then I gradually changed my mind and decided that they were inspired by like a sunset, especially like a winter sunset. It's basically just probably going to end up keep on growing and growing. I do like the colours in this one at the moment, but I'm really hoping that when I get to the end of my little very tiny knitting ball that I can then change it to like a slightly brighter colour. I'm thinking that I'm going to end up going back to like a yellowy shade. I can see myself end up knitting this for quite a long time yet. It is like what I call a doodle knit blanket, and it's one of them blankets where it has got holes in it because as I say, I kind of use it to practice stitches without worrying too much about things going wrong on it. It's a bit like similar to how I do my little daily doodles. It's just like my little practice knitting session. So as you can see here, there's like already a hole down here, and there's a few other holes in different places where I've accidentally dropped stitches and then managed to recover the amount of stitches, but haven't been bothered to go back and put like the stitches back on the needle and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just kind of one of them knitting projects where I don't really mind if it ends up with holes and stuff in it, because A, it's for practicing, and B, when I eventually ever decide to finish it and cast it off, I can then work into it with some like embroidery and some darning. But yeah, I'm basically at the moment just doing a load of like knit stitches until I can then change colour. And then what I'm hoping to do once I've changed colour is then like come up with another heart design, but perhaps do them like smaller, do it so that the hearts have got little patterns in them and stuff like that. Right, so for my daily doodle for this evening, I still haven't decided what I actually want to draw. Obviously, I do have the owls sketched out in my sketchbook, but I still can't find the reference photos that I originally used for them. What I could do is perhaps just rub them out and draw another one. But yeah, not really that excited about the idea of painting an owl tonight. I think it's because obviously to make a picture of an owl work quite well, you have to obviously paint quite a lot of wings in, and I don't have the patience for that tonight. I think I'm either going to paint like another little polar bear, because I'm a little bit obsessed with polar bears at the moment, or maybe paint a reindeer. So my little deer painting is done for today. He did end up getting quite big, and irritatingly I didn't misjudge how big his antlers were when I originally sketched them out, and then they ended up going across onto the other side of the page, which meant that I had to deal with painting over this bit, which irritated me, but luckily it was only little parts of him that had to do that. But yeah, I think he turned out okay. He definitely grew from the sketch as well. I think the sketch I had all his, like, the bottom of his legs in, but by the time I sat and painted it, I realised I hadn't drawn it out very well. So what I thought I could sit and work on next is I really want to sit and paint the little character doodles that I sat and drew out the other day, ready for my little kids art craft tutorials. So I think it's quite a good idea to kind of like have little painted examples of them to show what we're working towards in the video and stuff like that. But what I thought I could sit and do is kind of talk you through my process of painting like the little character doodles that I've done. It's a slightly different process to how I would paint like a daily doodle or something like that, and it's something that I actually want to do a bit more of next year, is paint a few more of these little character designs. So as I say, I thought I'd kind of sit and paint one of these little characters and just talk you through the process a little bit. Okay, so to paint these little character doodles, rather than using acrylic paint as my main like medium, I tend to use watercolour paint. So I have these little Daler-Rowney Aquafine watercolour paints, which hopefully I can get into. Sometimes they're a little bit tough to open because the paints that I use tend to dry. It's my fault because I very rarely bother to wash out my paint palettes. So as you can see, paint all over the place. Oh, that one opened alright. Then my Daler-Rowney Aquafine watercolour paints, and then this set is one of my favourite watercolour paints. Oh, it's got a paintbrush in there. Oh, that's handy because it's a nice one with a nice like fine tip. Again, I keep on being really lazy and like leaving my paintbrushes like standing upside down in paint water and then wondering why the tips of them have gone all like horrible. But this one got a nice fresh little tip on it, so that's going to come in very handy. But yeah, so these are my Creative Peak watercolour paints. Got them off of Amazon, and yeah, I love these ones because they're really vibrant. They still act like watercolour paints. They do come out very, very vibrant, and I just love some of the colours on, especially these colours here, which are equivalent to these ones. But yeah, mainly be using watercolour to paint this little dino character. So I've just been and got myself a little fresh jar of water. I might end up using a little bit of like white acrylic paint eventually, but that's more just for like cleaning things up and perhaps adding highlights. There might be a couple of times when, say like if I haven't rubbed out the graphite properly, the watercolour paints might pick out some of the graphite and then go a little bit muddy. So sometimes I like to have just a little bit of white acrylic acrylic paint. It's almost like essentially using it like Tipex sometimes. This is like a children's book style illustration or a children's character. I quite like to make sure that they're really vibrantly coloured. I'm often really inspired by Quentin Blake. He's one of my favourite illustrators, and I know that he kind of used like watercolours and then inks and stuff like that. Not gonna lie, that's sort of why I started using watercolour to do these like little character doodles, because I got very inspired by how his drawings are. He's always been one of my favourite illustrators, and obviously our styles aren't quite the same, but I do think it's sometimes worth taking inspiration from other artists and looking at their techniques and stuff that they use, not necessarily copying them, but getting inspiration. Sometimes worth looking at artists who are completely different to you and have a completely different style. I sometimes like looking at abstract artists and seeing if there's anything that I can take from what they do and stuff like that. Never really tried doing abstract art, but it might be something that I could have a look at in the future. But anyway, going off on a tangent, let's have a look at how I'm going to paint this. So first thing I definitely need to do is lighten up the whole sketch, try and get rid of some of these muddly drawing lines down here, and just make sure that there's as least amount of graphite on it as possible. I'm going to try and do it fairly slowly because I still obviously need to maintain the marks so I know where I'm painting and what I'm at drawing and stuff. Yeah, I just want to try and make sure that enough of the graphite has gone and that it's not going to try and interrupt the paints and the colours too much. I think that's probably why I tend to gravitate a bit more towards using acrylic paints, especially on daily doodles, because I can be a little bit more quick and loose and a bit more sketchy with acrylic paints, where with watercolour you kind of have to be a bit more assertive and sure about what you've drawn and that you've got stuff in the right place. Might have been a little bit heavy-handed with a pencil on this, so I've got a feeling it is going to pick up some of the graphite when I paint it, but as I say, I've always got my white acrylic paint I can use as Tipex, and eventually I'll probably end up fine lining it as well. Right, so I've completely lightened up the sketch. The irritating thing is my putty rubber has run out. I usually use a putty rubber to lighten up the sketch a little bit more, but I'll just use a very basic rubber which has done its job. It's rubbed it out. Putty rubber might have picked up a little bit more than the pencil, but that would do. So I have just grabbed myself a little scrap piece of paper as well, just so I've got a little place just to test out a few colours and make sure that when I've chosen the colour it's the right shade and consistent and stuff like that. So I'm going to keep that to the side. Now, what colour should I paint my little dino? I think in my head this little dino fella is like a foresty green colour, so I'm going to go straight in for this colour here. Obviously load up the watercolour paint with a load of water because that's how you activate it. Probably should have gone and washed out this tile, but I'll be alright. Right, so I'm going to put some of that foresty green on my palette, but I don't want it to be quite as neat as that. I want it to have a bit of slightly different shade, so I'm going to mix in a bit of purple. It's not going to make amazing amount of difference. Don't always using just colours straight out of the palette. I like to kind of have a bit of a mix. Right, let's see on this little tester piece. Oh yeah, I think that's quite a nice colour. I'm going to try and start off fairly light, and then I can obviously add shading and darkness and stuff to it later date. But yes, let's go straight in, and I'm going to basically just build up a wash of the colour that I want. This paper that I'm using is actually really good for watercolour, so it shouldn't have too many issues. Sometimes if you use watercolour on the wrong type of paper, it can start tearing and stuff, because obviously it's quite watery, and you'll find that it'll start picking up little grains of paper and stuff as you're painting it. But this seems to be behaving itself today, so that's good. So I'm just going to layer on a base of the colour. I don't necessarily need to worry too much about it being very even, because I'm going to work into it with shading and stuff. I want to make sure that he is covered. The reason why I painted this illustration in the first place is that I wanted to do it for a little kids tutorial, which I still want to do. I've just got to decide with the kids tutorial how complicated and detailed I want the painting stage to be. So I could do this one, which is a bit more complicated, and then also perhaps do a little simpler sketch where it's literally just coloured in with felt tip pens and crayons. There's nothing wrong with showing a kid how to do complicated drawings, because some kids thrive on the challenge of it and like to really test themselves when they're drawing and painting, so I know I used to. So I could do like a few different versions of the illustration. So I am gradually like shading, but I don't want to go too much into shading at the moment to kind of focus on adding a bit of a layer in. So obviously I can work into shading this a bit more in a minute. Let's get the rest of this base colour on. I'm a little bit worried about painting around this bit because I think it's going to pick up a lot of graphite, but actually it shouldn't be too bad because it's quite a dark green. If it was like maybe a yellow or something, it definitely would pick up some of the graphite. Just about managed to get away with it, I think. There's one little arm. Must forget to paint that over a little arm, but I'm just going to do his legs as well. So the only trouble is with watercolour paint is that every time I like use water to activate a colour, it's going to slightly change the lightness of it a bit. So I'm just going to carry on testing. I think I need to put a bit more purple into that now. Yeah, I'm just going to carry on testing it on this little sheet to see if I'm getting it the colour that I want. Now I know I've got stars drawn out there, but I'm just going to basically paint over them. They might have to be like painted in with my acrylic paint, or I have actually got some sparkly metallic paint that I could maybe use for the stars, but for now we're just going to do a wash over them. Love the fact that I found this paintbrush in amongst my watercolour paints, because as I was saying, my other ones basically destroyed them where I've been a bit lazy. And the bristles have all gone a bit ski-wiffedy on them, so it's a little bit annoying when you have ski-wiffedy brushes. It's a little bit annoying and a little bit difficult to control. Sometimes you end up with like hairs falling off your brushes, and yeah, it's just a bit irritating. So I'm really happy that I found this brush. Also, it's going to come in handy for when I start painting my little baubles. Right, so we're gradually building up this little dino's base colour. Now I am going to do the base colour for this leg, but it is going to end up probably being quite a little bit darker than his front leg when I come to shading it. I mustn't forget to paint the rest of his little toesies in. Let's get them painted. So I've got that toe, that toe. Okie dokie, so just got to paint in his tail. Mustn't forget I want to leave a little bit of it so that you can see a bit of colour underneath the tail. That's quite light compared to the other bits. I'm going to need to mix up a little bit more. That's a bit better. When I'm working with watercolour paints, I basically just have to be a little bit more considered about where I'm painting, a little bit more controlled, and it's all about layering things up. Obviously I'm no expert. There's probably like traditional watercolour artists who will look at the way that I paint in watercolour and go like, oh my god, what are you doing? It's kind of like a method that works quite well for me. So right, so I'm going to start now kind of working into this with a bit of shade. So I'm going to kind of try and come up with a dark colour, but I don't want it to be like a straight black. I tend to avoid using just straight black colours. So that could be that colour, but I might also just add a little bit of pink, kind of warm it up a bit. Oh yeah, that's a little better. So yeah, I'm going to kind of like use a pinky, purpley kind of colour scheme. I'm going to need to start working into the bits that are going to be quite dark. Just kind of blend out the shading a bit, because I don't want it to be like a really harsh line. I'm going to add in a few more harsh lines when I come to properly outline it. For now I kind of want to soften out, give it a bit of a blend. And actually that is where I'm going to bring in using a little cotton wool bud. I'm just going to kind of twizzle my cotton wool bud around. It kind of softens out the blending a little bit more. Do a bit of shading underneath his mouth. Again, go on with my cotton, just kind of smooth it out. Carry on with that shading onto his little armies. I don't want to soften out every single line and mark that I make. Some of them do need to be quite harsh and defined, especially the bits where like the present is near his body and stuff. Just kind of about thinking about where the darkest parts of his body would be. You don't want his tail to end up too dark because it's got a little star at the end of it, so I think his star's going to end up like dangling down some like yellow beams and lining up his tail quite a bit. Might just do like a line for the underside, but leave the rest of it fairly light. And actually what I might need to do in a minute is lift some of the colour that I've put down. Let me just finish off getting some of these shading bits in. Trying to think of where like his muscles and stuff would be, because where there's like a change in the muscle, that'd be fairly shaded. And actually if his star's there, it might be adding some like little yellow rays to him, but again I can sort that out in a minute because I'll probably lift some of the colour. And to think of it as well, the texture on him doesn't have to be 100% smooth, because he would have like dinosaur texture as well, so I can sort of get away with not like having like a completely smooth blend. Just adds to the dinosaur effect. I never did paint his upper arm, did I? Meg, hold on. 3, 4, 5. I'm going to eventually paint some little claws onto the hands. His hand might have to be a bit where I rescue it a little bit with paint because I've managed to paint that a bit too big. Oh well, things happen. It's always rescuable eventually. Right, I really need to darken up his little back leg here. So I think rather than fiddling around too much with that hand, so I probably need to make this arm a little bit bigger. He's coming along. He's still looking quite flat, and I think it's because he hasn't got actually much highlights now. He's got quite a lot of dark colours. So I think what I need to do is kind of work on lifting up some of the paints that I've already laid down. So I'm going to dip my paintbrush in water, and I'm just going to go straight onto the painting without picking up any paint off my palette. Rub paintbrush over where I want to lighten him, and then with my little cotton wool buds, have I got a clean one? Ah, yes, got a clean one here. I don't want to use like a one which has got like a load of dark paint on it because it'll just end up darkening the picture. But yeah, I'm just going to, with my cotton wool bud, just go over the bit that I want to lighten up, and it should start picking out some of the pigment. Right, let's do that again for his arm. Definitely needs to be a bit lighter, and I just went in and darkened it. Right, and again, cotton wool bud, give it a couple of dabs. I want to make this hand a little bit lighter. A couple of dabs again with the cotton wool. Need to make this knee a bit lighter as well. Oh, blimey, picked up a lot of water there. That's alright. Let my good old trusty cotton wool bud come in handy because it should soak up some of the water while I was picking up some of the pigment. And then I'm definitely going to lighten up tail. Really lighten up one of his toes. So yeah, one of my goals for next year is that I want to see if I can do a few more like children's book illustration projects. I've recently actually been trying to start writing my own little children's books. I'm currently writing a Christmas one. Not going to be finished for this year's Christmas, but yeah. Currently in the middle of kind of writing a little children's Christmas book. Also, the other thing I'd quite like to look into doing is doing some like little animations of some of the stories that I've been writing. I've been gradually teaching myself how to do animations on Photoshop, getting there with it. I think you'll probably find that like there's better software for little animations. I think I'm gradually getting the hang of doing it. My nephews, bless them, came around the other day and I sat there showing them how to do some little basic animations on Photoshop. So I'm just going to lighten up this bit around his cheek. I'm quite liking all the different colours that are coming out. I don't know if it's picking up quite well enough on the camera, but there's quite a lot of like little pinks and stuff shining through, which I quite like. What I think I'm going to do is I want to kind of add a bit like of a warmer colour to the illustration. Because there's pinks in there, I think it might look quite nice with like a bright yellow. And also because I've got a star on the end of his tail, so maybe if I use like a brightish yellow colour. I'm just going to work into some of the... Oops, that might have to be a bit correct with some watercolour paint because I accidentally picked up some graphite. Let me see if I can get a nice vibrant yellow. That's green, I don't really want it green. I can use the yellow out of this palette. It's a bit better. Right, okay. I'm just going to introduce a bit of yellow into some of the lighter bits. I don't want it to be too like intense, so I'm going to carry on using my little baby dabber cotton wool bud. Just a bit more yellow there, a bit of yellow on that part. A few little tiny bits of yellow highlight, a bit more of a glowy effect. I really am going to have to get my white paint. I think that's actually where his nostrils are, but it's picked up quite a bit of the graphite there, so get my white paints out in a minute. People who have better technique than me with watercolour paints will be like, no, don't, but as I say, not an expert. Right, okay, so I've added a bit of yellow paint in, just to kind of add a bit of warmth into him. I think what I'm going to do now is first of all cover up my little nostril dots with some white because it's irritating me. Cover up that bit. You need to end up painting his nostrils in, but although they might end up being like line work, the nostrils. Is there any other bit that I need to use a bit of white for? Yeah. Some there. Oh, probably need to use a bit of white for his little claws. A bit more white, and then what I'll end up doing is around the white bit on his tails, go around it with like an even brighter yellow. Then a bit of white to his cheek to lift that up a bit. Claw, the same here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I kind of give him like a little eyebrow line. I haven't actually drawn his eyes in yet, but. So I'm just going to go back into the bit near his tail with a bit more yellow. Next, let's paint the little bit that is underneath his belly. I kind of want it to be a really light yellow, so I'm going to try and go in fairly lightly. Same for here. And underneath his tail. Mustn't forget to eventually paint a little star. And also I've got the little stars on his body to remember to put in. So I'm gonna use like a little pink to be like the shading colour for the belly, because where that's still a little bit wet, the pink and the yellow mixing together, making like a really nice warm but not too dark orange colour, which I like. The same here. Love that shade of pink there, so I'm just gonna work on getting that similar to this bit. Must remember to make sure that the bit under the present has a bit of shade in it. Oh, he's looking adorable. Right, let's paint his little pink hat. I think I'm gonna go for pink. Nostrils in, little smile. I don't want to like do too many fine lines because I want to kind of let the paint do a lot of the talking and a lot of the work. When I do like the fine lines, I'm not going to do like whole intense lines. I'm going to do like broken lines and little wispy lines like this and cross hatching. So as I say, I want to let the paint do most of the talking. Basic idea of how I go about painting my little character doodles. I'll probably still end up adding a few more little painted stars in. Hold on. Hold that thought. Just quickly paint the little stars in. One letter. I'll do a little speck for the last one. I think what I might end up doing is putting some silver paint on and refining them stars a little bit. But for tonight, that would do.